Hello, hello. This is Dr. Natasha, nurse practitioner, and I am welcoming you to Unboxed and Fearless. This podcast is where we dive deep into stories of resilience, empowerment, and transformation. Your host and author and advocate for health and wellness. Today, we are shedding light on an important issue affecting survivors of the Eaton Fire. Joining me is Scott Maynor, a seasoned wildfire attorney who is helping residents recover their losses and navigate the legal process. Whether you're insured, uninsured, or just unsure of your options, this episode will provide the clarity you need to move forward. Let's start. Hi, if you can introduce yourself and give us some insight about your background and who you are.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, my name's Scott Maynor. First off, thank you for having me on the show. It's a real treat, and I've been following you for a while, and you have a lot of great information. So I'm really pleased to be here.
Thank
Um, like
you.
like you said, I'm an attorney. I'm a wildfire attorney. And that sounds like a made-up thing to some people, but it actually tends to be a very busy niche in the law, unfortunately, because these wildfires are so devastating, and now more than ever, they're quite common. So that's what I've been doing for the last several years, and my legal team has been prosecuting legal wildfire claims against mainly utilities for the last 15 years, and we've done about 16 different mass tort wildfire cases. So thanks for having me again, and I'm pleased to be able to talk about this topic because it's so relevant right now.
Yes, and just to give some insight about where we met, we were volunteering at the Pasadena church,
That's
and
great.
we were on site. It was it was very informative, the limited amount of information that we could gather, but I wanted to be more intentional to make sure you're on today and kind of discuss that in depth. But let's start off. So, can you share what we know so far about what caused the Eden fires? There's so much discussion around it, and everyone has like some kind of like theory, right? And we just want to get some insight from a professional.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. So, kind of diving right in, the Los Angeles fires that sort of erupted right around January 7th of this year, just a few weeks ago now. Two of them really caught the media's attention, the Palisades fire and the Eaton fire, which sort of engulfed the Altadena area right around Pasadena. And that fire was particularly interesting to me, because we found out very early on in the process how that fire may have started. There's been a lot of eyewitness evidence and video evidence of the fire originating right under these large metal transmission towers and transmission lines that are owned and operated by Southern California Edison, the big utility that operates in Southern California. And logic will tell you, well, there's a fire underneath their power lines. It must be them. And as a lawyer, I've kind of learned by investigating these cases, we have to be very careful to jump into conclusions because we don't want to point the finger at the wrong defendant just based on some loose evidence. But I've actually seen some of the video and read and spoken to people who witnessed the origin of the fire, and it is more than jumping to conclusion. It's very safe to say that we've got strong evidence that suggests it was SoCal Edison's equipment that started the Eaton fire that day. And there's a number of reasons why that should never have happened. And because it's avoidable, it's just it makes it that much more punishing and devastating for folks because it did not have to happen.
Wow, that is so interesting. So now that you give some background insight about how it actually originated, let's talk about understanding what typically happens when fires are originated in this aspect. Can you tell me a little bit more about how we can move forward?
Yeah, that's so obviously people in California on the West Coast, they recognize that there are wildfires every year, whether they be grass fires that sometimes turn into urban and suburban area fires, and they can be devastating. Most of those fires are caused by a number of other things, like maybe a cigarette or a truck chain that's dragging on the freeway, lightning strike, and maybe even arson, unfortunately. But the sad part of those fires is they really don't have a big legal component like the Eaton Fire does. And so unfortunately for those folks, they have to rely on FEMA and their insurance and other federal and governmental support systems, which, trust me, is great when you can get access to those things and when they actually come through and help people. But for fires like the Eaton Fire, there is another alternative for survivors, and that is hiring an attorney who understands wildfire litigation and can prosecute these cases successfully. Because when you have a culpable defendant who has been negligent, like we believe SCE has, it's going to be my job to make sure they pay these people back for every dime that they've lost. And so the next step for people after they've talked to their insurance carrier or FEMA or whatever other resources they need in the immediate, they're going to need to transition a new conversation to finding an attorney who can help them navigate the legal steps so that they can get paid back for their losses and be able to rebuild their lives.
Interesting, because I'm glad that you mentioned that, because people are so clueless about wildfires, especially if you didn't grow up around them, right? I'm from Michigan, and I just had no clue why all of these wildfires are taking place. And it just really, I'm still baffled why we aren't even more like ready and equipped to handle them. But that's a whole deep
That's a whole nother show. We'll talk about that
so,
too.
but so I'm just glad you gave a little insight, because I'm always asked that question because now I live here, but I'm still a couple of years new here. I'm a military family, so it's good for us to understand why this is happening. So, who is eligible to make a claim? Can we speak more about that?
Right. Yeah. Thank you for asking me that, because there's a lot of survivor's guilt and misinformation that both play a part in how people consider themselves as a part of the fire. And I think everybody understands that if you owned a home or real property or real estate in the wake of the fire, you're going to have a claim. I mean, that's pretty given. I think everybody feels comfortable with that understanding that if you lost your home, you've got a claim. And that's true. Where people kind of stop is they say, well, what if I'm a renter and I have to make a PSA for my renters out there? You've got a claim. You've got to call an attorney too, because it may be the only way you are able to get anything back up from this disaster. And you could just be a tenant and you can have a very good claim. So I want to encourage those people to consider reaching out. Beyond that, you could be just a guest in a home. You could be a visiting family member or a friend who was sleeping over. And if you had to run out of a home that was going to catch fire that night, that's an experience that you will never forget. And you're going to have a claim. People who had to evacuate are going to have claims too, especially those people who are close to the fire. And wildfire lawyers will call this the zone of danger. The zone of danger. What does that mean? Well, it kind of means you were close enough to the danger of the fire, the ember, and the smoke that there could have been a physical impact on your person. That could have been breathing in black smoke from the fire. That's inside the zone of danger. So you need to be able to consider yourself to be like, hey, maybe I should reach out. And even if you're not sure, reach out and find out if you're qualified. And those are kind of the regular folks who have claims and they're eligible. Owners, renters, people who were in the zone of danger that night or the days after the fire. And then you've got businesses. Businesses have claims. Workers have claims for loss of income. If you worked in a grocery store like the Aldi in Altadena, I saw it. It's gone. I don't know how many people worked at that grocery store, but those people have claims and they should reach out too. Finding another job is not easy under the circumstances. And so these people may have a claim to be reimbursed for their loss of income. And then lastly, and not least, is the children. You know, our young adults and our children under 18, they often don't have a voice in a lot of places. And under the law, they've got a voice as long as their parents and their guardians help guide them to an attorney. Now, generally, the way I handle my children is I work directly with the parents and say, hey, you're responsible for your kids, and I'm going to do what's best for your child with you. But let's discuss that because until they're 18, you're going to be able to make their decisions for them as their guardian. And we always help people navigate those because children incur heavy emotional distress and respiratory illnesses, and they need to be taken care of as well. So it's a big, wide criteria for people. And I always encourage people, if you're not sure, just call me. We can talk about your case, and I'll find out very quickly if you qualify.
So obviously I'm in the medical sector, and it's
Mhm.
important just to kind of touch a little bit. um,
Sure.
don't have to dive too deeply into some of the illnesses and conditions that can also be impacted by this. I understand that we've been warning the public about some flare-ups or exacerbations with some chronic conditions, obviously COPD, people having asthma and other underlying conditions, and having exposure to just the particles in the air around these areas, and them not really prioritizing their health because they're so worried about obviously where they're going to sleep and how they're going to feed children and how can they gather these resources that have expired. Do you have anything in mind that you're thinking like these are some of the conditions or any of the medical concerns that people should have at the forefront of their mind if they're not thinking about it? Because
Yeah, that's such a great question. And somebody like you is going to have, the knowledge and the experience and the skill set to identify those illnesses and help people navigate that. I have, in my experience, I've seen a number of things from obviously you're going to have some burn victims, and there's going to be some acute damage and illnesses from smoke inhalation, um, which can be treated. Sometimes they have longer lasting effects, but really, I see very often more long-term chronic respiratory illnesses, especially among children developing asthma and headaches and fatigue, and just a number of symptoms that generally stem from their exposure to a wildfire. People think of wildfires as a lot of times it's like, oh my God, you got trees on fire and they're burning. And that's what we see, a lot of times. And that can be unhealthy, right? But what's really dangerous is when a wildfire interacts with an urban and suburban area like it did in the Eaton Fire, and you have temperatures of over 2, 3, 4,000 degrees burning Tesla batteries, plastics, and computer chips, and things that just should never be burned. And they get into the air and they get into the walls and the windows and your clothes, and they can become a permanent problem. And so I really hope that, the medical professionals that are in and around the Los Angeles area open their doors for people that are suffering from the Eaton fire because they're going to need a little extra time. And it might not be the first 2 weeks. It could be a year later or 6 months that they start to develop symptoms that need to be treated. And it's just terrible and sad for folks. And then don't even get me started on the mental health aspect of what happens. Um, you and I spoke about this when I met you at the church. The mental health part is devastating for people. Post-traumatic stress disorder is absolutely real. PTSD, as it's commonly known, affects people in ways that can ruin families and lives, and that can develop depression and anxiety and frustration and anger, and it can lead to all kinds of ruinous things, so alcoholism and just kids perform low performance in schools. I've seen them going, they were grade A plus students in sixth, seventh, eighth grade, and then after the fire, when they go to high school, they struggle to show up, and their personalities are different, and it's just terrible to see that. So I would encourage everybody to, if they can, stay out of the smoke and soot homes as long as they can. Make sure they're thoroughly cleaned. If and just your clothes and other items that might be affected, I would like people to get rid of those if you can, and call us because we can help you get those back in the end. So, that's a big topic, Natasha, and I wish I had more time to talk about it, but it is serious. So,
Wildfires do not just destroy homes, they disrupt families and their lives. And I'm so glad and thankful that you decided to mention mental health as well. And yes, we did speak about that. So I'm so glad that you did decide to mention that. And you're just highlighting so many other reasons why people need to take a moment to just make sure they're seeking legal advice to equip them on how to move forward. But let's talk about how they can reach you and any additional information that you think the community will need in terms of immediate assistance or someone to get in touch with.
yeah, there's so many resources available to people right now. It can almost be overwhelming. And if folks have access to internet, I will share with you a list of places that I would recommend for housing shelters, pet shelters, mental health facilities, FEMA resources, and so on, so people can get an idea of all the resources that are available to them just through the fingertips of their phone. Um, and I can share that after the show. But to get in touch with my team, it's really simple. You can call my office. It's 626-244-7045. And you can email me info@calfireattorneys.com. And look up my team. We have a big team that's working on this case, and we're prepared to help everybody we can. So I hope we can put that information in anywhere you'd like, and hopefully people will be able to reach out.
Thank you so much for your time. We will definitely add links and information and how people can directly contact your office. And I just want to many blessings to you and your team because this
Thank
work
you.
is not easy. And I know that you encounter so many people, so many different situations, and just being able to have the strength and the mental capacity and the resilience to help others and help them find their resilience. That's very important. So we want to thank you for helping impact the community. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's my pleasure. Every person has a story. Every family has a story in this situation, and we want to make sure that story's told. So I'm here for it, and I appreciate you giving this topic time. So thank you so much for what you're doing too.
Thank you. Talk soon.
Okay.